I spent 100 days on a deserted island in Stardew Valley. If this video can get to 1000 likes, I'll make 200 days. Also, this video took over 50 hours to produce, so please do subscribe. I try to upload the highest quality content I can on this channel, so I promise you won't regret it. Anyways, enjoy the video. The first thing I did on day 1 was look through my supplies that I'd managed to salvage and that I would have to survive off. Some tools, food and drink, saplings, some seeds, and an entire house. The first thing I needed was a proper food source, as hunger would soon set in. So I spent the morning clearing a space, then building up a farm from my seeds that I had brought. I then decided to explore the island for the remainder of the day, looking for a good spot for my saplings. By the time night fell, I put away my resources and headed to bed, leaving the rest of the island for tomorrow. In the morning of day 2, I realized that I needed wood to light my campfire. How unrealistic. The first thing I did was water my plants, then cleared out a bunch of space on my island, before finally planting my saplings next to my home. After that, I realized how slow I was from hunger, so I decided to eat some forageables and spend the rest of the day getting some food supply by fishing. I did get mostly trash, but any food was worth it. Day 3 was a rainy day, so I foraged in my cave for food before heading west to do some fishing. While I was clearing a small island next to my main island, I noticed it had a mahogany tree, which I realized would be my only permanent source of hardwood. I then fished off a small pier until I was slow from hunger, then returned to my home where I put away my valuable food and checked out all the new machines that I would eventually be able to craft. I also noticed that I was cold, so I used some wood to start a fire. I woke up on day 4 to a crow eating my crops. Very sad. The first thing I did was water my remaining crops before foraging in my cave, then checking out some buildings that I could possibly build in the future. I then planted some mahogany seeds before once again being slowed down by hunger. So I did what any hungry person would do, go fishing. I fished for the rest of the day before eventually heading back to my house. I wasn't paying attention to my food, so I was surprised when I suddenly started taking damage from starvation. Luckily, a chicken took care of it. Day 5 was a very special day. It was the day that my very first homegrown food was ready. But I didn't eat it all immediately since I needed more seeds to get more food. I needed to wait until farming level 9 so I could unlock the seed maker. In the meantime, I decided to plant some mixed seeds in hopes of getting some good crops. I then had a healthy breakfast of fish and parsnips before spending the rest of the day clearing the island of trees and fiber, then doing a little fishing to finish off the day. On day 6, I watered all of my crops before realizing that there were 2 areas on my island that I couldn't access because of my low-level tools. So I decided to automatically upgrade my tools in relation to my skill levels. For example, at level 2 foraging, I would upgrade my axe 1 level. I then chopped a bunch of trees, and with the seeds I got, I made a small makeshift tree farm to have a sustainable source of wood, sap, and seeds. I then spent the rest of the day fishing on the pier. In the morning of day 7, I noticed that my fishing rod and my axe were both upgraded since I had reached level 2 in both of those skills. So I excitedly ran down to the stump blocking my path and chopped it down. The little island had another entrance that was blocked by even more logs that I still couldn't chop down, so after exploring the little island, I decided to visit Grandpa's shrine. On the way there, I found a small package that contained 2 survival burgers, which were very helpful. I then chopped trees for the rest of the day, hoping that I would get a bunch of foraging XP to get even closer to upgrading my axe. I wanted to craft some drying racks on day 8, so after grabbing some parsnips and making 4 of them, I placed them down near my crops. I then grabbed some parsnips which I put inside the racks. With that out of the way, I decided to spend the entire day chopping trees around my farm, then replanting the seeds in the bigger areas around my island. On day 9, I crafted and placed a scarecrow on my farm and searched my cave for food before happily watching my food dry in the rain. I then chopped some trees on my island to the west before planting a couple of seeds on the beach before fishing for the rest of the day. I ended up catching an eel, which was pretty cool. In the morning of day 10, my dried parsnips were ready. I was confused as I couldn't eat them or do anything with them, so I just put them away and put some fiber in the drying racks, in hopes of getting some hay for my future livestock. I then cleared out my cave and watered my crops before chopping all of the mahogany trees on my island and replanting the seeds, and finally wandering back home extremely slowly. On day 11, my beans were ready for harvest, so I excitedly grabbed them and had a taste. I then watered my plants and checked on my tree farms before deciding to spend the entire day fishing on the pier. When I eventually started to starve, I ate some of my fresh catch, then headed back to my home. I woke up on day 12 to a letter from Mayor Lewis saying the egg festival was tomorrow. Thank you for the notice. The first thing I did was grab some hay from the drying racks, then water my crops before checking on all of my tree farms. I then fished for the rest of the day, but today I wanted to wait until nightfall and kill some monsters. When night eventually fell, I had to fight off the bats with a scythe, and after only killing a few, I was forced to go to bed because I was about to be knocked out. I really wanted to craft some of the new machines on day 13, and I realized that there were only 1 or 2 materials that I needed for every single one: metal bars. And I could only guess that there was some kind of mine behind this log, so I decided to dedicate as many days as it took to getting foraging level 5 and getting an iron axe. I spent these days mostly chopping trees, replanting seeds, grabbing forageables, and fishing to survive. On day 14, I reached level 4 in foraging, and finally on day 30 I went to bed and leveled up to level 5 foraging. The grind was finally over. When I woke up on day 31, I had my reinforced axe and I was extremely excited. The first thing I did was plant some honeysuckle starters sent to me from Leah, then immediately ran down to break the logs to the south of my island. And on the other side was this. I cleared out a little bit before returning to my main island, where I broke the logs in front of the cave entrance, hoping to get some kind of place where I could get ores. It was a hot spring. A very disappointing hot spring. Sad that I had to find some other way to get ores, I went back to the overgrown area and spent the rest of the day clearing it all out before heading to bed. On day 32, after watering my crops, I immediately headed straight down to the area below my island to do some cleaning up. I spent all of my energy there, and then when it eventually ran out, I headed over to my hot spring and regained all of my energy, before heading straight back out to do more cleaning out. Night had fell by the time I was finished, so I just headed home and went to bed. I spent all of day 33 clearing out the area below my farm. I completely finished the right side, then started on the left, relaxed in the hot spring, then continued on until night fell. I also wondered what the squares on the ground meant. Either they were places for things to spawn or just decoration. On day 34, after watering my plants, I headed straight back down to the below area and once again spent the entire day there clearing it out, with the exception of one hot spring break. But it was all worth it, as by the time night fell I had completely cleared out the area other than the rocks that I couldn't yet break. It was very satisfying to have such a large open area where I could build or design anything. In the morning of day 35, I once again watered my trellis, then headed downwards to scout out what I might want to build and where. Once I had generally decided, I just walked around my island for a bit to see how everything was going, before heading down to the pier and fishing for the rest of the day. When night fell, lots of monsters spawned and I almost died, only making it home with a tiny bit of health left. On day 36, after watering my crops and clearing my cave, I decided to chop all of the trees that had grown in my tree farms. So that's what I spent the entire day doing, as well as replanting the seeds from the trees. When I was finished, I had a quick look at my player stats before watching some deserted island television until nightfall. I was foraging in my cave on day 37 when I found a void mushroom, which gave me +5 luck but took 350 energy. So I decided to try it out by walking down to the pier and getting ready for some +5 luck fishing. As soon as I ate it, I got knocked out. Day 37 did not go to plan. In the morning of day 38, I was starving, so I had a nice jerky breakfast, read my mail, then got straight to work clearing out all of the rocks or shrubbery that had appeared in the orchard area. I then remembered missing out on some fishing the day before, so I got to work catching some fish. I fished until 8 PM and got a decent catch other than a heap of trash that I had collected. I put away all of my fish and headed off to bed. Day 39 was the day of my first ever harvest of honeysuckle. After grabbing them all, I did some foraging in my cave, then headed over to my western island to do some clearing and cleaning. After I finished that, I decided to sell a bunch of items that I didn't urgently need for food or resources, so I could get closer to a coop. I then spent the rest of the day to the north of my island planting acorns to make a new tree farm. Day 40 was an extremely special day. It was special because the minecart in my cave that was previously out of order suddenly worked and could bring me to the mines, meaning that I could get ores and cave resources to build all of the machines. So I took the minecart and descended. For some reason I didn't end up getting a sword, so I decided I must fight my way down with a scythe until I did get one. At level 3 I suddenly became hungry and I hadn't bought any food with me, so I was forced to return home and chop trees for the rest of the day. Day 41 was a rainy day, so I took advantage of not needing to waste energy watering my crops, and after grabbing some food I headed straight to the mines. By around midday I had made it to level 10 where I was hoping a sword awaited me. It didn't. So I continued on my quest, and by the time my energy was well and truly out I had made it to level 15. Happy with my accomplishment, I headed home. On day 42, after harvesting some hay and watering my crops, I headed back to the mines with one goal: get a proper sword. And believe it or not, by 3 PM I had reached level 20 and had unlocked the steel small sword. The next level was even an infested level, so I got to try out my new sword on slimes and grubs. By the end of the day I had reached level 25, so I returned home, spent some time organizing my chests and headed off to bed. I woke up on day 43 to a patched pickaxe as I had made it to level 2 in mining. I immediately headed down to the mines in hopes of reaching level 30, only 5 levels away from where I was the previous day. And luckily I ended up making it all the way to level 35 and collecting a bunch of copper and other resources. I then returned home where I crafted up 3 furnaces and placed them down, then spent the rest of the day chopping down trees. On day 44, I harvested and watered my crops before heading once again straight down to the mines in search of some copper. By the time I reached level 40 and gained a bunch of copper, I left the mines and returned to my home to smelt up some iron and chop some trees. While I was doing that, I noticed that I had a stone owl on my farm, so I picked it up and placed it in my cave. I then fished on my island for the rest of the day. Day 45 was a very special day. It was a special day because it was the day that I could finally get a farm building. I spent all morning looking for a place for construction and clearing it out to build the coop, when I suddenly remembered about the southern orchard area, so I wandered down, found a good place and built it. I then realized that I needed 10 clay to build a silo that I did not have, so I spent the entire rest of the day digging for clay. This was not very efficient. I forgot to record on day 46. All I did was go to the mines and reach level 50. On day 47 I was heading to the mines when I had a look through the machines that I could craft, and I made a little list of the ones that I wanted. A lightning rod, an espresso machine, a sorbet machine, ice cream machine, and a smoker. It was lots, but I was sure it was going to be worth it. So I descended and got collecting resources, and I didn't stop until I had enough. And finally on day 62 I woke up to my final iron bars having smelted. I picked them up and crafted a smoker, the last of the machines I had to build. I then placed them all down, excited to see how they worked. At first I tried to use the sorbet machine, but I needed honey for that. So I crafted some tappers and attached them to some trees for maple syrup, which is a material I needed to craft beehives. After realizing that my ice cream machine needed milk, I put a fish in my smoker and spent the rest of the day clearing out the southern orchard. I once again headed straight to the mines on day 63 because I wanted to make it to level 100. I only had 5 levels to go as my previous mining adventures had gotten me to level 95. I spent all day down in the mines. I must have had terrible luck that day as ladders were extremely hard to find. But eventually I did make it, getting my very first star job. Very happy with my progress, I rode home, grabbed some gold bars and headed off to bed. I woke up on day 64 to a bunch of newly upgraded tools as I had leveled up a bunch over the grind. The first thing I did was put another fish in my smoker, then harvest some roses before grabbing my maple syrup and crafting 2 beehives, which I placed down. I then spent the rest of the day chopping a massive number of trees on my farm, and after throwing my wood in a chest I fished until nightfall. I was doing this in the morning of day 65. For some reason. When I was done, I spent some time going around the island picking up some blackberries before deciding to head back down to the mines in hopes of getting down another 5 levels. But my luck was just incredible, and I was able to get down 10 levels in one day, as well as get a bunch of resources and monster loot. So I grabbed my space boots and headed home. On day 66, I was determined to get to level 120 in the mines, so I went straight there and descended. I once again had incredible luck, and by 3 PM I had reached the bottom of the mines and gotten the skull key, which I realized I had absolutely no use for. When I returned home, I went down to the orchard where I decided to spend the rest of the day hoeing the ground for clay to build a silo. When I eventually ran out of energy, I had gotten a solid 5 clay, so I went back to my home and put them in the chest with my other pieces. I wanted to get some copper on day 67, so I went straight to the mines and accidentally stayed there until midnight. I only looked at the time when I left the cave, so I put away some loot and headed straight to bed. My honey was ready on day 68, so I excitedly grabbed some fruit and tried putting them into the sorbet machine. I needed a lemon. How could I possibly get a lemon? Disappointed, I headed down to the orchard and hoed a great plot of land getting clay, and by the time night fell I had easily enough to get a silo. So I went back to my chests, grabbed the needed resources and built up a silo next to my coop. Now all I needed was to get an upgrade for my coop until it got an incubator and somehow get an egg. In the morning of day 69, I harvested some roses and sold some leftover produce before deciding to spend the day fishing for flounder, as they were really good smoked and I had just run out of them. So I ran west and got fishing. Now you can't fish for just one particular kind of fish, it's all just weather and the time of year. And I must have got one of those wrong, cause all I got was tilapia and trash. On day 70, I wandered over to the southeastern island, climbed up the stairs and did some fishing. I fished until midday and was planning to do some clearing of the orchard when I noticed my energy bar. Seeing as how low it was, I ate an octopus to regain some energy. Instead, I got knocked out. Very cool. I forgot to record again on day 71. All I did was craft a geode crusher and go mining for iron. In the morning of day 72, I noticed that I had gotten a piece of obsidian from the geodes that I had broken the previous day, which was the key resource needed to craft a juicer. So I decided to spend the entire morning until midday waiting for iron to smelt so I could craft it. When I finally had enough iron, I crafted up the juicer and put an apple in it before going down to do some fishing, while waiting for my apple juice to finish. But I gave up a couple of hours later when literally all I caught was trash. I then chopped trees until nightfall, then headed off to bed. I woke up on day 73 to a sapling in the mail, which I planted. I then noticed that my juicer was still going, so I went down to my tree farm and chopped them all down. When I was finished with the majority of them, I wandered over to my farm area and cleared out large clumps of long grass for hay, before going and checking on my juice, which was finally done. I grabbed it, realized I couldn't drink it, and threw it straight in the shipping bin. I spent the rest of the day clearing out my caves for food. In the morning of day 74, I wooded my crops and cut some hay before heading over to the orchard to do some foraging. I then went over to my hot spring and picked up all of the forageables scattered around before returning to my orchard and clearing out some of the tall grass there to fill up my silo. I then decided to do some fishing on the pier before spending the rest of the day chopping down mahogany trees on the western island. On day 75, I harvested some cashews and roses before deciding to spend the day down in the mines collecting resources. By the end of the day, I had collected a bunch of ores and even a diamond. I also noticed that my salmon berry juice was done, so I threw it in the shipping bin, curious of how much it would sell for. As it turns out, it wasn't that much. In the morning of day 76, I grabbed some honey, then spent some time clearing out my tree farm and my beach of trees. I then put away my wood and headed over to the mines because I needed a bunch of iron to build more machines. I spent the entire day there collecting ores, minerals, and killing monsters. At 10 PM, I decided to call it a day and headed home, put some iron in the furnace, and went off to bed. I put some iron in my furnaces in the morning of day 77 before once again heading straight off to the mines. I collected a bunch of iron down there, and by around 1 PM I returned to my house where I smelted even more iron and used the resources I had gathered to craft up a canning machine, which I placed down. I then grabbed a sardine and put it in just to see how it worked. My canned sardines were ready in the morning of day 78, so I grabbed them and put in a ladyfish. I then crafted up an extruder just to see what it did. After placing it down, I put in a jar of honey, then left to go over to do some fishing. That was when something amazing happened. I broke a package on my island and it dropped 3 brown chicken eggs. This was huge. All I needed to do now was get a big coop with an incubator and I could have livestock. The only problem, I needed 10,000 gold, so I spent the rest of the day fishing to make some quick money. On day 79, I chopped some mahogany trees on the western island and had a healthy breakfast of literal flowers. I then went into my hot spring cave expecting to see forageables, but it was just completely empty. Luckily, my other cave was filled with food, so I happily grabbed it all. I then once again decided to spend the entire rest of the day fishing to make some money. In the morning of day 80, I noticed that I forgot to light the fire over a cold night and I started the day with half health and energy. Great. The first thing I did was do some tree chopping, then I noticed how much wood I had in my chests. Since I only needed 3,000 gold until I had the 10,000 I needed for the coop upgrade, I decided to sell 2 stacks of wood just to experiment how much they would sell for. That night I made 2,000 gold per stack, easily surpassing 10,000 gold total. On day 81, I excitedly grabbed some resources and ran downwards to the orchard area where I upgraded my coop, unlocking the incubator. I sprinted back to my house and picked up the eggs, which I promptly placed inside the incubator. I now had a basically infinite supply of chickens. I was extremely happy. I then decided to do some fishing to finish off the day, as I was planning to do some shopping the next day. In the morning of day 82, I was very happy because the lemon tree that I had ordered from Pierre's had arrived, so I wasted no time in planting it next to my home. I then decided to spend the rest of the day fishing off the eastern cliff face of my island, as well as chopping trees in my little tree farm next to my farming area, and my big tree farm to the west of my home. I also got some instant canned sardines, which was pretty cool. On day 83, I was looking through my craftables and realized that I wanted to craft a wax barrel, so I grabbed the needed resources and built one. I then put a jar of honey in my machine that turned it into beeswax before combining that with a flower and putting them inside the wax barrel. I was so excited to see what would come out that I fished next to it while it was working until nightfall. I eventually gave up and headed to bed. In the morning of day 84, my candle was finished processing, and after checking that I couldn't place it down or eat it, I threw it in the shipping bin, then started another one processing. I then went down to check on my incubating egg and filled the hay slots before checking out the 3 new buildings that I could build. The spooky shed, the fishing shack, and the mini spa. And I wanted the fishing shack, but I couldn't get it because there was no way to get a legend, sadly. I then decided to spend the rest of the day down in the mines collecting up iron. Day 85 was the first day of winter, so when I went outside I spotted some winter foliage, a piece of willow bark, which is a medicinal tea. Seeing as it was tea, I decided to craft a glass jar which said it could turn tea into kombucha. But when the bark didn't want to go in the jar, I realized that I must have to turn it into an actual tea, not just a branch. With no way of doing that, I decided to plant my only winter seeds, some mint, then head down to check on my egg. It was still incubating, so instead I spent the rest of the day chopping trees in my tree farm. In the morning of day 86, I found yet another tea leaf, so I decided that I needed to make a keg to make actual tea out of the leaves. Until I realized that I needed farming level 8 to unlock the recipe. Nice. The next thing I did was grab the heater that Marnie had sent me earlier and place it down inside my coop for when my chicken hatched, before heading back down into the depths of the mines, searching for iron and gemstones for the rest of the day. I woke up on day 87 to a letter from Pam giving me some juniper berry seeds, which grow in winter. So I planted them next to my mint seeds before heading down to my coop again to check on my egg. And amazingly, it had hatched a baby chick, which I named Egg. I then rushed back home and put another egg in the incubator. I then decided to eat one of my tea leaves and go fishing, as it gave me +2 fishing for a couple of minutes. Sadly, I still only caught trash. Literally caught nothing but trash. This is so sad. In the morning of day 88, I put some wood in my fireplace, then found some tall grass that was surviving the winter because it was growing in the little river. I then decided to set my sights on crafting a grinder, which grinded produce into other goods such as spices. The only problem was that I didn't have enough iron, so I put some in my furnaces and headed out to the mines. When I had a decent amount, I returned to my farm and refilled my furnaces. Eventually, I had enough bars to build it, so I placed it down, put some cord inside, and went to bed anticipating what it would give me. On day 89, I wooded my crops and harvested some mint before tending to my chicken and collecting some pine tar from my tappers. I then realized with my pine tar I could make a vinegar cask, so I got to work smelting some quartz as I needed 30 refined quartz to build it. I also needed way more coal to be able to smelt that much, so I crafted up 2 kilns to produce some coal. I then spent the rest of the day in the mines collecting copper and other resources. On day 90, my cornflour was finished processing. I couldn't see any use for it other than to eat it, so I just threw it in the shipping bin. I then put a parsnip in the grinder before going down and tending to Egg, who had laid their first egg. I excitedly ran back to my house and crafted up 3 mayonnaise machines, which I brought down and placed, before putting the egg inside one of them. I then decided to do some fishing for the rest of the day, but all I ended up catching was trash, so I gave up and went to bed. I woke up on day 91 to Pierre at my door. I don't know how he got there, but I'm happy he's gone. I then wooded my crops, then realized that I had a masterwork fishing rod and some fishing clothes. I'd reached level 5 in fishing. So I decided to just fish all day. I changed into my new drip and threw out the line, and I didn't stop fishing until night fell. In the morning of day 92, I wooded my crops, then tended to my chicken before heading off to the mines to collect more iron. By the time I was finished, I had collected a whole lot of resources and killed a bunch of slimes, so I headed home to reorganize my chests for the remainder of the day. On day 93, I went over to my coop and named my new chicken Smiley Face. I then decided that I wanted another big coop to double my chicken production and my chicken capacity. So I dedicated as many days as it took to saving up enough money and building the coop. For some reason it wasn't instant this time, which was strange. But eventually on day 98, my big coop was finished its construction and I was very happy with it. I spent the rest of the day smelting up quartz for a vinegar cask, which I crafted and placed when I had enough resources. I then grabbed the grapes that I had foraged earlier in the year and threw one inside, excited for what it would give me. In the morning of day 99, I wooded my crops, then spent the entire day going back to my fishing roots, wearing my fishing cap and top, standing on the pier and casting my line. Very peaceful. And finally, it was day 100, my 100th day on this deserted island. On other series, I would have spent money or given away gifts, but Nob's friendship was all that I needed. I headed off to the mines to grind resources for the entire day, then headed home and enjoyed some late night fishing to end off the video. Thank you all so much for watching, I very much appreciate it. If you enjoyed, remember to subscribe and also like, and also subscribe to my second channel, link in the description, and in my comment. Also, if you feel like it, you can follow my Instagram, it's redtm_xd. Oh yeah, the vinegar cask gave me vinegar. I don't know what I was expecting. Okay, bye now. Thank you for watching. Bye. Subscribe.